Hello, welcome to another painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and I'm going to bring you a landscape today, like I was saying. It's called Sepia Road, and I did this last week. Now, this normally would have been done as a live video, but that's been a bit difficult to pull off, mostly because I'm not alone in the shop. And I just don't like doing that kind of video with people around. And I don't mind when customers come in or whatever, I'll just pause. But when there's somebody just there 24/7, well, they're not there 24/7. Hey, you, come here. That's my dog. Sorry about that. I already started this a few times, so I'll let it go. Lay down. No. Anyway, so the reason I'm doing a little sepia landscape is because most of the paints on my palette have dried, and I'm in transition mode, so I don't want to squeeze a bunch of new paint out. Pretty easy for me to just do the limited palette like I'm doing here, which is burn umber, white, yellow ochre, and black spinel will make an appearance a little later on. And I'm pretty happy with the painting. I kind of put the reference together when I was having lunch. Just thought, well, I want to do something. Now this board, I'd actually prepped for this another figurative series I want to do. And everything went wrong. I'd started off with, I have these pine panels, but unlike the MDF, there can be streaks in them, so I tried a transparent approach, and I was happy with the finish and the surface. However, the next day I came in and went, oh, I'm working very sort of transparent on these figures, and I would just have a bunch of these streaks come through, and it's not going to be a good look. It's not an attractive look. So then I went in and with a bunch of white gesso and some black gesso and a bunch of color, and eventually kind of got a decent color. Next day, that was a whole nother day, because we're talking prep on 14 boards. Doesn't take all day, but that was the meat of what I got done. I waited for it to dry, came in and sanded the next day, and I had chunks of white gesso, big white dots coming through, which totally obliviates the transparent thing I want to do, because I'll never get rid of those, and tried picking them out. It's just a nightmare. So my solution there is going to be just to order some MDF boards for that project on tomorrow, which will be Monday. Today is Sunday, the 15th, by the way. Anyway, sometimes that's how things go, and but I thought, well, maybe I'll just grab one of them and do a landscape, because I knew it wouldn't matter. So far we're working with a lot of transparency here. The color I'm doing 90% of the only color I've used so far is burn umber, and burn umber goes pretty dark. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. We're going to go a notch darker with the black spinel, but even there it doesn't actually go all the way into black. It's just kind of tinting the umber a little darker. But yeah, so we're doing burn umber, black spinel, lead white, I believe from Williamsburg, and actually we're using the Old Holland yellow ochre, of which I got a tube. And that's my palette, and the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want my full color palette to dry. So anyway, as far as the move goes, I am I'll probably do a video on my phone showing the current status, and I just bought a big pail of paint today. And I've been in there puttying the wood everywhere, and I still have more of that to do. And then I'll be getting in there and painting and doing a second coat probably, and then I'll be sure to show some progress shots, and eventually I'll put a video of the progression of the new. It's the new old studio. Yeah. If you dig in the real bowels of this channel, you could just put the word studio. I think you'll see a little studio tour. Anyway, that's pretty exciting, but I don't much like painting, that kind of painting, but no one else is going to do it, so. And I can't see moving into the studio the way it was for the entire time I was there. I've got to change things up. So that's what we're doing. So let's talk some philosophy of painting here. Let's talk about. I had a great question on the channel from a gentleman who was asking for advice on how to deal with detail in his paintings, specifically doing less of it. Which I'm a really good guy to ask about that, because coming up as a young person, the illustrators that I always loved were the ones with tremendous amounts of detail in their work. And that was, and when you talk about comics, it was artists like Neil Adams and Barry Windsor Smith and people like that that would just throw in huge amounts of detail, and where everyone else was just using, a sleight of hand because of deadlines, right? When you're slamming in tons of detail, it always takes more time. And in a lot of ways, we might have a belief that that's going to make the work better. And there are some schools of painting that use excessive amounts of detail. I'm thinking people like, well, it wasn't excessive in his case, but I'd say Waterhouse, and I want to say Rousseau. I'm thinking of the pre-Raphaelites is what I'm thinking of, and that stuff's great, as things like etchings and engravings that are just, chock-a-block with detail. But one of the main innovations of the when landscape painting was still being innovated was in the 1800s. I think there have been a few innovations in the 20th century in landscape painting, but not a heck of a lot, and that's one reason why I don't really paint like a 20th century painter. I paint more like a 19th century painter. 20th century? 20th century. Yeah, 1800s, right. I never understood how they did that, but so when we're talking about the 18th century, we start off with traditional work, and there wasn't even pure landscape per se. Landscape was almost always in the service of a theme or a subject. There was always a main figurative subject or a bunch of figures in the landscape, pure landscape, and it took many decades in the 19th century before anyone was doing landscapes that were completely devoid of figures. It was just not something that was done. It was an innovation. So one of the foremost people that came in and really innovated landscape painting was, of course, John Constable. And he was in England, and the other guy would have been Camille Corot, and he was in France. Those are the two that I focus on. You could make arguments for a bunch of other guys. There was stuff going on in Holland and whatnot as well, but it's the train that I follow. It's the Constable Corot, and from those people we get into people like Ines and things like that. And when you get to late period Ines, for example, and most of the other tonalists, most of the detail has been subsumed. And in fact, in this book I've been reading, which is letters by George Ines and essays and things, he's talking to his son about, how detail is a plague. You've got to get rid of it, Meanwhile, painting out all this beautiful stuff he'd done, but he's right in that the detail it's distracting, it's tight, and it creates a certain type of effect, but it's not a sublime effect, I guess, is what I would say. Anyway, let's talk about some of my solutions that I suggested to this lovely gentleman who asked the question. The first one is to use a brush that's slightly bigger than what is comfortable. So in the painting I'm doing right now, I'm using a lot of 2s, but I did quite a lot of work, most of the sky, and everything else I could think of with the 4. Then I moved into the 2 when I had to. So I'm always trying to use the largest brush that I can. If it just gets ridiculously uncomfortable, then I step down like from a 4 to a 2, but I never go below a 2, even if I'm doing a tiny like 3-inch painting. I stick with the 2. I never break out the sables. I used to. When I first started, I used to do all these lovely flowers and weeds with the sable brush. You know, if I saw it in my photo reference, I painted it, and some of those paints are quite, they're nice, they're decorative, but they're not sublime, and so that's the number one way to subsume detail. Just you don't have the ability to really get in there and get tweaky because you don't have a tweaky little brush. That's number one. Number 2 is what I call squinting down. So, or if you, like me, wear prescription glasses, I'll just paint with my glasses off, and so I'm forced to really just deal with big shapes, and I can do an entire painting like that. It doesn't really matter because I'm not hung up on the individual strokes. I'm trying to get everything in there and get it done, and this is, I guess, something I didn't really touch on in my response to this gentleman, which is that you can work quickly as well. Don't belabor things. Don't grid it off into inch squares and painstakingly paint each inch, which is a valid way of working. I'm not dissing it, but if you don't want to go the detail route, it's definitely better to just move along. And I'm a big believer in taking as long as you need, but not over long. Not over long. You want to move. You want to make a fresh statement. You want your painting to make a fresh statement. Yeah. Anyway, so you can squint down. Another suggestion I had, and you can move quickly. And another suggestion I had was to possibly stop way earlier than you would normally. Like say at the natural end of a day, I will always work to try and have the painting at some level of finish by the end of the day. There have been times where maybe all I was able to do is the sky, and the next day I come in and do the land, But what you can do if you have a real problem with the detail, and what I suggested is you can just put the painting in another room. Don't look at it for a little while, and pull it out and look at it, and you'll apprehend it, and you go, wow, this has got a lot going for it right now, and you'll be maybe more respectful when you go in and just touch up a few things and try and keep that freshness. That's always a challenge with the second pass, or I feel I can do third, fourth pass too. And just like anyone else, I run the risk of losing that fresh quality. And what do you gain? Maybe modulation. Usually what you lose more than you gain, though, because you'll have a bunch of fresh strokes, and you're going to replace them with smaller strokes, and everything turns into chiclets or rice grains or daubs. It doesn't tell a story. It doesn't breathe, and you want your painting to be able to breathe. You want it to be able to expand and allow consciousness to interpenetrate it and come through it and flow around it. That's really what you want. That's what you want. Yeah. And so the one of the last suggestions I had was to do studies after people that are painting in the loose, free way that you wish to work, and do so with a brush that's slightly uncomfortable. As big, heck, I could do 5x7 with a number 4 if I need to, and I try. A lot of people wouldn't even think, oh, number 4 here. No, it's my 2, my 1, my 0, my sables. Yeah, you don't need it. Do it big. Yeah, use the corner of your brush. That's what you do when you're trying to use a brush that's uncomfortably big. Yeah. You can, and if you see my brushes, that's why all the corners have been rounded off, because I'm using the corner of my brush instead of grabbing a smaller brush, and that gives you far more expressive and interesting brushwork. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful, and wanted to get you something. And sorry it wasn't a live video, but I tried to give you some good tips and pointers here too, and a bit of an update. So until I get back with another video, which will, hopefully be another one this week coming up. Please. Oh, by the way, thank you to those of you that have been sending me donations. Your support really means a lot to me. And until I'm back with another video, please take good care of yourself, your family, love your enemies, and stay out of trouble. All right? And get to work. Get cracking if you're not painting right now.